Now, whilst I'm waiting for parts for the Lamborghini Huracan, today is the day we're going to give the Octavia VRS3, the Daza swapped Octavia, a first start.
I was lucky enough to find this 2018 Audi RS3 Daza engine and gearbox that had been involved in a big flood. Now, the car itself was actually internally full with water up to the top of the dashboard. The engine was completely flooded, full of water, about 15 litres of water come out the sump, some out the cylinder, and also just intake system completely full of water. So this was a massive risk because I just don't know if this engine is ever going to run again. But all we can do is try and get it to run, drain all the water out of it, and it's also coming out of the RS3, which is a Cat B car, and it's going to go into my Skoda Octavia estate. Now, we've got the engine out of the RS3, managed to get it back into the Skoda in the last video. Now, let's see if we can make it work with the Skoda and get it running.
And I've just spent the last 3 days burying my head in wiring diagrams, trying to work out everything I need to know possible that enable me to swap the wiring over between the Skoda's 2-litre engine to the Audi's RS3 Daza engine. Now, as you just saw, this isn't the first RS3 engine this Skoda's had in it. It did have the CZGB in, and I did make some alterations to the wiring to the Skoda to be able to get that to turn over. Now, we didn't get any further than that, but the wiring for the CZGB engine is different again to the Daza. So I'm gonna have to try and trace my steps back, put this back to the Skoda Loom, and then start again, and then convert it to the Daza Loom. You with me still? Now, this is the loom that I took out of the flooded Audi RS3. I've taken kind of most of it from the bulkhead. We do have our fuse box, we have our T91 engine connector, and all the wires in between. So the winner of the Audi R8 competition last week chose to take the cash alternative, which means the car is unsold. I still have it. I put a poll on Instagram, and 90% of you wanted me to relist the car, put it back on Compete for Cars. So I've done that, and I've also completely slashed the odds, nearly halved them, so you're now twice as likely to win. So go grab your tickets, guys. Compete for Cars, £1.99. I'll put the link in the description, and you can win this Audi R8 for £1.99. And I'll see you for the live draw. Good luck. I have already started stripping all the rubbish tape off the wiring, so it is all exposed and we can start working on it. Right, bear with me. I've drawn a diagram of the RS3 and the VRS. I'm going to try and explain as simply as possible before I confuse myself as well about what we're doing. So we have the RS3, we have the car, we have the T91 connector, we have 2 additional connectors coming from the engine, we have the engine, and then the fuse box. Exactly the same on the Skoda, albeit one of the connectors, the smaller connectors, is slightly bigger. It's a 14 pin instead of an 8 pin on the RS3. That's primarily because the Skoda has petrol particulate filter, so there's just additional sensors, and that is why. Now, what we're doing is the ECU talks to this connector, let's just say, and then that connector talks to the car. But the reason we've got to change it is because if you look here, the wires I've drawn to the car, they go to different pinouts. So the RS3 is, for example, fuel pump pin 40, but on the Skoda it's pin 60. So when the signal's coming from pin 40 on the RS3, it expects to see a fuel pump signal, and it's not. It's getting something completely different, like a brake light signal, for example. So therefore it's not going to work. It has no idea what it's going on about. So what we need to do is swap over the 40 and the 60, so then the Skoda understands the RS3 signal it's sending to it. And that's what we've got to do with all 91 pins. We have to swap them all over so the Skoda understands everything the RS3's engine's trying to tell it. But that's not where it stops, because there's these other additional plugs here. Some of them are simple because they go straight from that plug to the connector, and a lot of them go straight to the fuse box, and there's also wires coming from the engine straight to the fuse box. So that's why we've got to change that as well, because also the fuse box has different relays, different fuses in different positions. So I need to swap over basically everything to match what the RS3 is doing. So everything, we can get rid of a lot of stuff, all the petrol particulate sensors, all that, all the wires we can get rid of and replace them with all the ones that the RS3 needs in the Skoda's fuse box. And we're going to carry over these 2 connectors as well, get rid of these 2, because everything in the engine bay is only engine related. We just need to change the signals going to the car, so the car understands it. I hope that makes sense. I don't know if I've just made things worse. And in these folders here, I have complete engine wiring diagrams of both the engines, the Daza and the DTKB engine, plus I've also done printouts and made a couple of spreadsheets with all the designated wiring diagrams, where they go, what they do, every pin out on the T91 connector, which is our engine wiring harness. And I've also done a list of where I think, in this one here, I'll put some little screenshots up now, of where I think that the T91 on the RS3 would swap over with the Skoda's one. So basically all the rewiring that we need to do. Now the tricky thing is, I don't know how in depth to go in this video about the wiring. A lot of people don't want to know, they're just not interested, and a lot of people are really interested in the in-depth wiring stuff. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go a little bit more nerdy-ish in the next sort of minute and a half. I'm going to talk more about the wiring, a bit more in depth. So if you're not interested in that, just skip forward 90 seconds or so. And to give you an idea of a swap we're going to do, if we look at the first one, look, GX10 Lambda is on pin 15 on the Daza. And if we go to the Skoda and we're going to go down and we're going to go down to here, look, pin 42 GX10. Now I've already done my homework. I already know that is the correct one we need to swap over. And you can already see, look, I've put a pin 15 there, meaning we need to swap pin 15 for pin 42 on the wiring loom. That's an example of a swap. But unfortunately, that's the easy part. The complicated part is where things aren't a like-for-like swap. And if I give you an idea of that, if we look here, we have a T14A connector, which is one of the additional wiring looms under the bonnet. I'll just show you that. Or more simply, it's this connector here, look, coming from the engine wiring loom and then going back into the car's wiring loom. So it's basically an additional connector we need to rewire. You'll see that pin 5 on that connector is a power for the coil pack, and I've written here that it goes directly to J757. So if we go to our Octavia DKTB engine, we go to the coil packs and we look at the coil pack wiring diagram, we can see that the power in this 1.5 thick gauge wire, it is powering all the coil packs. The rule of thumb is power is coming from the top, earth goes to the bottom. So we can see the power there, and it goes to number 77 on our diagram. So we need to scroll to 77. And 77, look, power wire going straight into J757 relay. So that's where the power's going on that. But the problem is, the Daza engine doesn't have a J757. So now what do we do? So then we open our Daza folder, go over to the coil packs, and we see here that the power lead goes to 0.201. So then we head over to 0.201. 201 actually goes to our grey connector under the bonnet, and then it goes to back up and out and up to 62. So we need to go back to 62. 62, and 62 goes to fuse 14. Now this is the RS3's fuse box, and fuse 14 is this square 30 amp one here. So that is where our coil packs have to go to for this one. And just to show you, look, the Skoda's engine bay doesn't have that fuse, and that is because it goes to the J757 instead. And other things that can happen as well, like the RS3 has MPI injectors, the Skoda didn't. So therefore we have an extra wiring loom for the injectors, and that actually comes out, it goes through this grey connector here, back up into the fuse box. But the Skoda, because it doesn't have MPI injectors, doesn't have a fuse for it, whereas the RS3 does, and it sits in this spot here. So we're gonna have to take the fuse out of the RS3 and the whole wiring track and put it into the Skoda's fuse box and put a fuse in it there. Don't worry, I'm also very tired already. But the first thing we're going to do, we're going to start with the basic things like starter relays, main current supply relays, just so we can get the car turning over to make sure it's okay.
So what I'm actually doing here is double checking that everything on the wiring diagram is correct and it is doing what it says it's doing. So I'm following all the wire tracks from the T91 connector back to the RS3's fuse box and just making sure everything is correct. I'm going to do the same with the Skoda now as well. So then we've got a solid base to start swapping things over.
I don't know if you can see that, but the fuse box on the Skoda is so much simpler than the RS3. I reckon there's maybe nearly half the amount of wires coming out of it. Right, where do we start? I don't know. Now, the perfect way to actually do the wiring on this would be to de-pin every connector and re-pin it and then connect it back in. But if I'm honest, I don't want to do that for two reasons. One, because I can then get confused of where things have come from and potentially cock it up. And reason two is that I find that de-pinning the connectors and then re-pinning them can sometimes damage them, and they end up being a loose connection. And I did it with this one, and I just found that they don't all go back in properly sometimes, and they don't sit properly. So I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to cut all the wires and then re-splice them using heat shrink butt connectors, which is like an approved method by Volkswagen anyway. Look, they're everywhere, factory, look, these same connectors I'm going to be using. So it's not like it's a bodge or anything like that. There are hundreds of these all through the Loom anyway. So I'm going to reconnect them all like that. And I just think it's going to be the best way to do it. I mean, in an ideal world, I obviously wouldn't de-pin anything because some of the connectors go straight to where I want them to go already, but it's all within this complete jumbled mess. So there's no way in hell that things aren't going to be able to come out without me having to cut them or de-pin them. So I'm going to cut them, and that's the way I'm going to do it. And we're going to start with the grey connector because it's the most like the one on the Skoda. Right, so I've now cut out the grey connector from the RS3 Loom. So this will plug straight into this connector here, completely like for like, everything's the same. But now we have to feed it into the Skoda Loom. Most of these just go to the fuse box, so we can just get I've got the correct amps for each wire, so you can just feed it straight to a fuse box, put the correct amp fuse in, job done. 3 of the wires go straight back to the 91 pin connector on the RS3 Loom, but as I said, it's so jumbled up, I have to cut somewhere to be able to unjumble the mess. So, now, let's work this into the Loom. So now I've cut the grey connector out of the RS3, I can now de-pin all the wires that went straight to the fuse box, de-pin it from the fuse box, pin it back into the Skoda's fuse box, and then reconnect them to the Skoda RS3, that grey connector you just saw. And then that is one complete circuit. That is that T14 grey connector done. Now we've just got a lot more to go. Right, so fast forward on a few days, and I've just about split the RS3 Loom apart from the Skoda. So I had all intertwined all this, and I was just moving relays, wiring, fuses over to the Skoda's Loom, and I've now managed to break free from that. There are still bits that I need from that, but nothing that's going to stop us from trying to get it running for the moment. So this is now the Skoda's fuse box. So I've bought over that fuse, a relay, this relay box here. I've input about 3 or 4 different fuses as well. And the good thing is I haven't actually had to splice as many wires as I thought, because I haven't touched this connector. I've just integrated it into the Skoda's Loom. A lot of these wires, probably around half, actually fed back into the fuse box of the RS3. So I've just literally taken it from the RS3, plumbed it into there, and then haven't actually had to touch any of the wires. So it's only probably about, you can see, look, the ones I've actually spliced in. There's probably only about 11. And that's about it. There's a lot of wiring I need to remove still. So this is the old ECU connector that's still plumbed in a little bit. There's things like my O2 sensors up here. Look, I've completely removed them, and I've completely plumbed in the RS3's 2 connectors, because all the wiring again was complete, so I didn't have to cut it. So I do need to remove all these wires from this Loom. They're all stuck in there. And there's just a few other things that go to the fuse box which I've taken out as well, like the GPF filter wiring, which obviously we don't need, and a few other bits. But we should be good to now get the ECU and plug it in. So we've got the ECU back. A massive thanks to Dan at Litco for sorting this out. So I sent this down to him. He tested that it still worked, and it does still work. Even though it's been submerged in water, it is all absolutely fully operational. He's also de-immobilized it, so obviously it's going to be able to start with the Skoda's ignition, and he's also stage 1 mapped it, maybe stage 2. So this in theory should be running around about 470 horsepower. So yeah, all good. Right, we're going to plug it in now, get the battery connected, and see what happens. Obviously we've got to reroute the battery to the boot, but obviously I haven't done that. Here is just fine for now. So I forgot to connect my battery cable back up to the fuse box, so nothing worked, but I have just plugged it back in. I have just put the positive connection back on, and nothing has happened yet, but I am just going to turn the ignition on. So I've got dash clocks now. Look. Oh. So there we go. Heard the engine come to life there. Doing a few bits. First thing I'm going to do is just plug the computer on and see if it can read everything okay, and if what faults there are. So, hey, look, automatically scanned, and it's realised it's an Audi. So let's just do a full scan. That's good. That means it's connected to the ECU. It's talking to it. It understands it. Let's see what faults are within. So the good news is we are talking to the ECU and the TCU, so that is a great start. The TCU actually has no faults at all. Engine control module has 3. Lost communication, steering, yep, I haven't plugged the steering rack in. Brake system, not sure, but there should hopefully just be a plug unplugged. The only one that's of real concern is the throttle pedal position sensor. I don't know if I've connected it yet, or if I have, it may be wrong. So we'll have to look at that, but I don't think that's important to be able to start it. Yep, that's fine. ABS, yeah, that's fine. I don't think we've got to worry about anything else. So I'm just going to suck all the rubbish that I put in those cylinders, and then we're going to go for a crank. Obviously the fuel pump's not connected or anything like that, so when it cranks it will just turn over, no fuel will be injected, obviously no sparks either. I do need to fill it full of oil first, so when we do crank it on the starter it is circulating. Oh shit. Got to change the oil filter as well, so I do need to do that. So I have a list, which it is. Yeah, that's just oil. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. There's no water in there at all, so I'm not going to waste an oil filter just to swish it round and put it back in and then replace it. So that looks good to me. So plan is, obviously I'll stick all that Halfords oil in, and then we're going to turn it over, turn it over, turn it over, turn it over. I'll probably, if everything's looking good, I'll probably start it. I've bought brand new genuine spark plugs as well, because the old ones look pretty rubbish. I'll probably start it, run it for a couple of minutes, let the oil proper circulate, get a little bit of temp in it, and then I'll drain everything out, put new oil filter in it, and then proper good quality oil, and hopefully it will all work. That's 2 litres, 4, 6 will be fine. Right, it's doing something. Oh, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. I'm just going to put my foot on the brake. I'm going to turn it over. Is it going to turn over? Let's get around there. No. Fantastic. Yeah, it'd probably help if I attach this massive earth. Right, I've connected that. Let's try again. Oh, I left the ignition on. Fantastic. Is it going to turn over? Still no. Ah! Bloody hell, I haven't connected any of the starter motor. I swear I'm not doing this on purpose. I think I've just got so caught up in wiring in the last week, I've just completely forgot everything else. Right, 3rd time lucky. Come on. This is getting silly. No. No, this is now getting silly. Why is it not turning over? So I'm pretty gutted, but it doesn't look like I'm going to start it at the minute. I think there's various reasons. Now, on the computer, I was having a starter issue, and it was saying that my relay was short to ground for my starter. I've had a look, and so these are my starter relays here, starter relay 1 and 2, and I'm going to put up some pictures now because I've sorted it, but the signal wire coming from the car was in different positions from the Skoda to the RS3 fuse box. So I've just swapped them around, the signal. I don't know why they're different, but they are. That's got rid of that code. I have just tried turning it over again. It still doesn't work. Now, I've just been speaking to Dan Analytico again. Again, massive thank you for the help. We think we might be able to trick the car bypassing the gearbox and the selector and just short the starter motor and turn it over. Now, to do that, we have our main live going in. We have our signal wire here, which tells the car to turn over. I've traced that back to the fuse box. I've disconnected it from the fuse box, and all we've got to do is put a 12-volt feed. So basically just jab it straight at the battery and it will turn over. Now I did just try that a second ago and it wasn't working. Turns out I need my voltage regulator connected, which was one of the T8 pins. The reason I didn't connect it is because we're obviously going to be, it goes to the battery negative terminal here. It's that purple one at the bottom. Now, because we're going to be relocating to the boot, I didn't think it mattered, so I didn't connect it. But turns out it needs to be connected, just here, look, for it to send extra voltage to the starter motor. So, if we look here, look, if I just give it a bit of a... No, it's not working again. It turns over! So, let me just prepare and we'll turn it over some more, see what happens. Oi, oi! Look! Yeah, I've got a flat battery. Hey, look! It's alive! Sounds sweet. Go on, turn, baby, turn. Get that oil pumping. Go on, son. Sounds sweet. Go on, turn, baby, turn. So obviously I got it turning over by shorting out the starter, and it was turning over nicely. I have now just connected, I've put in new spark plugs. I've connected all my coil packs up. Everything is now connected. I've plugged in the fuel pump. I've plugged in the fuel line. We are good to go to try and get this thing to start. Now, I was just triple checking all my wires down here, and there were two on the T8 pin connector that I hadn't connected. One of them I've just spent, this one, just spent absolutely ages trying to work out, see if it's important to be able to start the car, see if it's anything that's needed. Turns out it's just for the aircon, so I'm not worried about that. But the other one, this one here, was gearbox related. Now, I've put it where it was supposed to have been, and now the car recognises it's in park, and I went to turn the ignition on, and the relay clicked for it to turn over. But obviously nothing happened because I had the connector out. I have now just plugged that in, which means this may now turn over on the key, and I've plugged everything in, so it may now start. So I'm now very, very nervous. Let's give it a go. Oh God, I don't know what to do. This is very nerve-wracking. Is it gonna turn over? Oh, it is! Oh my God! It runs! It runs! Oh! Oh! Look at that! It sounds absolutely sweet! Oh, it runs. It sounds sweet. That is my flooded engine as well. Remember that. Oh, my heart is going. It just started, it just ran, it runs sweet. I am absolutely buzzing. Look, I don't know, I've got goose pimples on my face now. Oh, what a massive relief. Oh, I'm going to fall over. I've gone a week. I can't believe that's just started. I can't believe it runs. That is my flooded engine, guys. And it just started straight up. The Daza is alive. The 2.5 is alive in the Skoda Octavia. I can't believe it, and I think I'm just going to end the video there, guys, because I don't even know what to do next now. But massive thank you to everyone watching, and I'll catch you in the next one, and we will be getting this thing driving. Cheers, guys.